Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, Senior Writing Coach for Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 28, Digital Desktop Organization to Increase Productivity. One of the things that I have found over my years as a scholar or an academic is that I've gotten increasingly lazy about how I organize my digital desktop. And I should say, which is I don't organize it at all. So up until just a few days ago, I would just save anything to the desktop, from images I might need for a presentation to, a draft of an article. I've noted in previous podcasts that I've also backed up my articles in email and on a hard drive. So this was sort of a third space. So some of those saves were there. I might save an article for class there, a picture of a receipt for health insurance, a reimbursement. So anything goes when it came to my desktop. And so this episode is going to be about making your desktop work for you to increase academic productivity, because I stumbled upon a tool that has really helped me think about how my desktop is either hurting me or helping me with my academic writing process. And for the purposes of this episode, we are just talking about the digital desktop, not my physical desktop, which is a whole matter. And you can see that in another one of our previous episodes about my office if you want to see what a mess that is. But the digital desktop is what we're focusing on today. So one of the things that I'm going to do is to share some slides and images with you to describe what I did about it. But as always, for audio only listeners, these pictures are not essential for you to see or to understand what it is that I'm talking to you about. But if you'd like to see them, you certainly can see them in the show notes where these slides will be. So let me share that presentation with you. And it's quite short. It's just a couple of pictures. So one of the things that I started thinking about with the digital desktop is how our desktops actually help or hinder our writing productivity. And what I've come to find after doing some reorganization with mine is that I think there's two ways it really can help us. So one is that you can use your digital desktop to establish a system about where your projects are stored and labeled. And I should just stop for a second and say, for some of us, we don't store any of our academic writing projects on the desktop for lots of reasons. Many of us are using, say, cloud-based systems where, some of the content might disappear. Maybe it's a shared system that you're using at your university, or you like to have the safe, maybe the portable nature of a hard drive, a portable hard drive that you can plug into different places. So some people just don't store writing on their desktop, period. But one of the ways that it can help you, and I'm going to show you in a minute, is that can be a space to remind you about your writing. The second part, which I'll show you in a second, is that I also think this is a good way to keep whatever tracking system we're using for remembering where all our writing projects are. If you use a digital system, I think organizing your digital desktop can keep that front and center. So I'm going to walk you through what I ended up doing about my messy digital desktop to work with both of those problems. So you can see, if you're watching my slides, a big mess of icons all over the place, some on top of each other. I did not count, but I'm fairly sure I have at least 200 icons all over the place. So anybody that has a nice, neat digital desktop, you might have a heart attack looking at mine. You'll see they're all over the place. There's pictures. I can see there's PDFs. There's random forms. A digital form I just needed to download, sign it, and print it. That's there. It's all over the place. I discovered a program called Fences. This may not be new to anybody else, but it was new to me, from a group called StarDoc. And what they do is they have software that you can install to make little shaded areas where you can move your icons or your documents or PDFs or images, whatever those icons represent, into the shaded areas. So I'll show you, I'll have the link to Fences at the end. And no, I don't have a promo from them, or neither does Defend and Publish, but it was just something I came across. I heard somebody mention it in another productivity episode, and I wanted to just try it to see if that would get a grip on the messiness. So this is a little of before and after. what I ended up happening was when I installed fences, and you can follow the directions. I'm not going to talk to you about how to do that if this is something that you're interested in. But one of the things that fences does, and when I installed it, was that it allowed you to make different shaded boxes or categories where you could put your icons. And I will say, just the very matter of installing fences is it had me choose with all my icons where they were going to go. So I could delete a lot of them. I probably had icons on there from 2016 that were just hanging out, you know, a screenshot or something that I needed once and then never got rid of. So it was great for just cleaning off my digital desktop. But the other thing that I started doing with this is I started to think about what would be the best way to have this work for me when I log into my computer and start my writing. And so for those of you that are looking at the screen, you'll see I came up with 5 boxes, and notice that, or 5 shaded areas. They look like little boxes for those of you not looking at it. And you'll also see I have a few icons that are not in boxes, which I'll explain in a second. But I really came up with 5 areas where I interact with my laptop every day, and I need to figure out what it is I'm doing with the content that might go in these boxes. So one of them is the graduate program I direct, the Master of Arts in Rhetoric and Writing. So for those of you that are following the slide, you can see the little shaded box in the corner, and then a whole bunch of icons that have to do with my graduate program that I direct, all in that box. I now have dragged all of those icons into that box. So now they're in a shaded area with a heading. It's very easy to identify that space on my digital desktop. I also have a category for defend and publish. So all these podcasts, screenshots, things like that I do are all up in my top right-hand corner. 3 other category, well, let me say one other category that is not one I'll talk about today, but perhaps another time. In my bottom right-hand corner, all the things that have to do with my children. So permission slips, forms, school paperwork, things like that, or maybe like health appointments or whatever, are all dropped into that bottom corner. I don't use that category a lot, but when I need it, I often need it fast. So somebody will say, Mom, where's that permission slip? Or somebody will email me and need something. So I do leave that on my desktop just because a lot of times it's a last minute item that I need to find. Okay, so if you've got a recap here, for those of you not looking at this visually, I have now 5 shaded boxes on my desktop. So one is my graduate program, one is defend and publish, a third one is my kids, and it's these last 2 that I want to spend the most time on today. I made 2 separate spaces, one for current academic projects, which is top center on my desktop, or if you envision a computer desktop, very top center, right below the webcam. And then the bottom, or kind of bottom center, is a spot that says project tracking. So both of these categories, I think, will really help increase writing productivity. And here's why. For current academic projects, what's in there are the items that I'm working on immediately that are things I'm going to tackle in the next, I would say, 1 month to 5 months, somewhere around there. So sometime before Christmas, all of these projects are going to be finished. And so what they are, 2 of them are conference presentations. One is a presentation I gave last week at the Textbook and Academic Authors Association, and then one is a presentation I gave this morning for the European Association for Teachers of Academic Writing. Both of those current academic projects have their own folder. I have an article I'm working on reading and writing processes. I have a talk that I'm going to give at the University of Leeds in the fall. And then I have a folder for my book project that I'm working on. Those are all things I'm simultaneously working on. And so why I like the fence around this area is that these are projects that are front and center. I can work with them here. Now, notice other projects that are going to be in, say, January of 2022 are not in this box. I also don't have projects that are just sort of ideas. Those are also all stored on my hard drive, where I have a general writing projects master folder and then lots of folders for all the individual little projects. Here, these are just things I'm working with immediately. And so what I'm going to do, and this will be my first time testing it out, is eliminating the content, or eliminating those folders and eliminating them from my desktop and moving them to my hard drive, my more backup storage. So that TAA conference that I just did last week, that folder is going to go to my hard drive. The European Association for Teachers of Academic Writing, I'm keeping that one up temporarily, even though I've already done that presentation, because I'm going to use that in a podcast for Defend and Publish. So I'm just leaving it there for right now. And I may, depending on what I do with it, may even move it over to that Defend and Publish folder. The other articles and presentations are just things that are, I know, coming up. And so one of the beautiful things about Fences, or any program like Fences, there are some free alternatives, which I'll mention in a second, is that I can see at a glance, this is the limited number of projects I'm working on at one time. It also shows me that I'm not just working on a project at one time. And I know that in previous podcasts, I've talked about juggling multiple academic projects, that this is just the reality of academic life, where you might be working on a conference presentation, an article, and a textbook all at the same time, and all with different timelines. So I really like having the fence around this. I have made it my mission, because I had to make a little rules about how I was going to use Fences. I've made it my mission to say, okay, in the current academic projects area, I can only have 5 projects. So 5 is my max. And so that's why that TAA project, that conference I did a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that folder is going to get stored in my hard drive. So I'm going to move it somewhere else, so it's not on my desktop. It's sort of out of my mind for now. Now, that doesn't mean I won't ever go back to it. I will, in a future podcast episode, talk about turning a conference presentation into an article. And so I never get rid of old conference presentations. I store them all in a folder because they can be content for writing later, but I'm not going to work on that as an article right now. I've got some other things I need to do first. So then the second part I want to call your attention to is my other fenced category that will help increase writing productivity, I think, and that's the project tracking category. I've mentioned in a previous episode, and I really need to do an episode on these systems, which I will do. Let me make a little note to myself. I will do a future episode on project tracking a little bit more generally. But I use 2 systems really to track my projects. One is where all my projects are at any given moment. It's a master scholarship chart. I also have a yearly goals chart where I divide my academic year into 6 segments. And I know I've talked about that on a previous podcast. So both of those charts are charts that I consult frequently. And my rule of thumb has always been to consult them on the Monday. When I come into work on a Monday, or I'm working from home on a Monday, first thing I do is look at those just to remind myself where everything is and where deadlines are. And I used to keep those 2 icons in the very center of my digital desktop. So, so that was my way to know where they were, but often they got buried with other icons that got layered on top of them. And in a mess of Word documents, they're not really distinctive in any way. Now I can see them right away. So I know to look at those. And so I have it just a set habit, and I just started this Monday. So hopefully it will be a set habit, I should say. I'm setting the habit that I'm going to look at these 2 things every day. Every Monday. I'm going to always look at the project tracking, to make sure where I am. And then every day I'm going to be looking at my academic projects where I can see the projects I'm currently working on. And I think that also keeps it cleaner, that it reminds you that I can't just solely focus on one project. I've got to know that another one is coming up. This doesn't give me any kind of mechanism for deciding which project to work on. And I know I've talked about that in other previous podcast episodes. But it does keep these things front of mind, right? So every time I open up my laptop, I can see that I need to work on these projects, right? It's not buried under a bunch of other things. So my writing is not put in a folder and stored for something later. And on the daily reminders, when I mentioned the project tracking being front and center, the very ease of being able to just open up my desktop and click that chart, take a 1-minute look, has really helped in terms of just being able to even look daily if I want to. I had to check on a deadline, and I didn't have to dig through emails to figure out, when's that deadline, or when did I promise I would do that one thing. I literally just clicked on my little chart, because I do keep that updated every Monday, and I knew right away. It was just very time efficient. So I'm hoping that this strategy will help you think about your digital desktop a little bit. If this is an area where you've got a little bit of a pain point or you've just ignored it like I have. And I want to leave 2 links with you, which we'll also make sure that we have linked to on the webpage for the podcast. But there's a link to Fences, and I want to say something briefly about cost. There is a free version of it. I did try it. It did not work for me. I think the software is just too old. But how much it cost for me to get Fences to put on my digital desktop was just under $11 US. So it was not expensive. And I decided for that amount of money for me to try it and try to get a grip on my organization, it was totally worth it. I would buy it again. I have 2 laptops actually, and I'm going to buy it for my other one that's that I use for something different. So it was very worth it for me. So less than $11 US. However, there are many, many websites that talk about free alternatives to Fences. I've not tried any of them, but I wanted to give you a link that is the most up-to-date link I found. It's from April of 2021. This podcast is being released in July of 2021. And there's a website there that talks about 7 free alternatives to Fences. If you Google that title, you'll find it. It's the very first search. So I'm hoping this helps you think about your digital desktop organization, and happy writing this week.